A 5-year-old boy was shot dead on Friday night after his father's bakkie was hijacked outside their home in Soshanguve in the north of Gauteng. It's understood the child had gone out to welcome his father when he arrived home at around 10:30 p.m. The tragedy has sparked outrage on social media about the high crime rate in South Africa. Criminal law expert Ian Ellis joins us for more. Ian, good to speak to you. Very, very sad state of events. Social media depicting the challenges with South Africa and crime, but these conversations are nothing new.
Good afternoon, Hugo, and good afternoon to the viewers, and of course, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, grannies, and future moms all around. Unfortunately, taking into account that it is a Mother's Day, it's quite a tragic start to go ahead and deal with in something like this. But unfortunately, it's all too common, and especially, as I've said before on the show, especially in a place like Soshanguve, that is becoming more and more of a mixing pot for criminal activities due to the poor policing and also due to the poor infrastructure and service delivery. It's starting to become a bit of a gangster's haven and hideout for all the elements.
So let's talk about where the shortcomings are. I mean, we know where the crime hotspots are. We pretty much know who the criminals are. Why aren't they in prison? Where are the resources being put or not being put? Is it a case of political will? Is it a situation where those in power do not know how to handle the situation?
Unfortunately, at the rate it's going, our police force couldn't go ahead and conveniently find a cartel with a GPS and a roadmap. And they know who it is, but they're not doing anything because of the huge elements of corruption that have crept in. There's elements with regards with political instability and infrastructure and poor service and resource delivery, which is, for an example, poor policing, poor community forum backing. So even when the community want to stand together, they can't because they're completely outgunned, outmanned, and they have no cooperation from the police whatsoever. That's the problem. But there's also, because of the criminal elements that are moving in there, there's that complete disregard for life. And unfortunately, another contributing factor has become the impact of social media, where the criminal gets glorified and your good people who are actually helping almost become collateral damage because they're not showing the elements of what people want. They don't show the wealth. They don't show the hard. They don't show the debauchery, and that's also there's a very big limitation on good role models, if one could actually say, which helps contribute to to higher crime statistics and lower coupled with high unemployment and high poverty. This is what you're going to end up getting.
So I want to touch a little bit on the culture of crime, if ever such a thing exists. And the reason I raise it is because South Africa is not the only country that has a high incidence of unemployment. There are many other countries whose statistics are a lot higher, but are not exposed to the same levels of crime that we're exposed to in South Africa.
What has taken place is that it's one thing having a high level of crime, it's another thing when you've got a high level of violent crime. And that's the thing, where you find in a lot of third world countries, you've got a high extent of pilfering, lower-end burglary, non-violent crimes. Now, hijacking, we're amongst the highest with regards to kidnapping, above that, I believe, of Mexico and Colombia at this present moment, which were kidnapping hubs. Is we're outscoring them on the crime meters. We are being seen as a very violent criminal country, not just a criminal hub, but a violent criminal hub. And there's a big distinct difference. Is it also then creeps into other aspects, such as your high extent of your gang violence and the individuals involved in your organized crime syndicates and your gangs. And that's what makes it more, that's what creates more controversy for South Africa, is the extent of the violent crime, not just the crime. Is you can have certain, well, it's a very low crime rate, But it depends. If you've got a massive group where it's money laundering only, but here we've got violent crimes. The cost of life is insignificant. That's what's becoming in South Africa.
It clearly is. And I suppose that the one question to ask is the availability of guns for criminals. And what are the laws that allow gun ownership, or certainly for the proliferation of firearms in the country?
That's one of those debates that can take all day, and you've got opposing and there's opposing groups on both sides. But if one could say an objective matter, the guns that are being utilized by the criminals are not those that are being applied for through competency certificates. They're being stolen from security firms. In particular, they're being stolen from the army and from the police. So realistically, it's not just somebody with an old revolver from 1948. You're dealing with guys with R5s, AK-47s. It's the gun ownership isn't the problem. It's the inability and ineptitude of the police, of the army, to actually control what weapons are getting released out into the market and what is being stolen, and the corruption that's dealt with. This isn't there'll be your gun that will be stolen from your normal citizen, but majority of the guns are being stolen are military and police grade. Those are not coming in through any other reason. Then there's corruption. And criminal elements operating from within our police and army department and army forces.
Now, given the rise in carjacking incidents, what preventative measures can individuals take to protect themselves? I mean, we're reporting obviously on this incident where a 5-year-old little boy was shot when his father arrived home at 10:30 at night.
You see, the biggest problem comes is that there's elements of cost, and a lot of the tracking companies and insurance companies have certain fail-safes in the form of what trackers can get installed for safekeeping, for emergencies, but those are expensive. The average person is barely making ends meet because of our inflation and consumer costs. They don't have money. We've got a very poor rate of insurance and trackers, which is why, especially in a place like that, like Soshanguve and certain of the townships, where you've got such a low rate of people, it's an easy soft target for criminals. They'll have those vehicles chopped up within no time. They're not worried about the fail-safe devices, and they pick certain. You need to be vigilant, but also, unfortunately, people are now having to look at the trends of what vehicles are specifically hotspots and high-risk vehicles. It always used to be things like Toyota Hiluxes and Ford Rangers because of the engines and the chassis. Now it could be for any reason.
Now, are there any systemic changes being proposed or implemented to reduce the incidence of hijackings?
Well, if one takes a listen to what our Minister of Police says, not much. Is considering the fact that we're in an election year and so little is actually being said, but they're just sitting and puffing up stats on petty crimes so that they look better and the amount of arrests and convictions. If you look at the actual amount of convictions and matters going to trial on extensive violent crime, it's actually quite low. But now it's so much easier just to go ahead and bust the lower end guys for speeding and possession of drugs. Not that these aren't offences, but the reality is, certain of these, there's often a vicious circle where guys are in the carjacking are also involved in gun running, trafficking of humans, drug trafficking, that kind of thing. By sitting and focusing all your attention just to get the guy who's got a bag of weed on them at this present moment is a joke, certainly, and it's only been implemented for a statistics perspective.